Okay.
Hello, folks. Here we are. Hello, 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 hello. British People's League, BritishPeoplesLeague.com on air at you this very cold in Canada, January 20th, Sunday, 2013. I always seem to have a problem getting the dates right, folks, so do forgive me. Okay, so here we are from one extreme to the other. We've got the extreme cold here, and our honored guest today is Don from California, where it's nice and warm. And we're really honored. I'm not trying to butter Don up. I don't think that the white right in the States realize what an asset Don is. There are very few who analyze as Don does. He's a real asset, and I invite you groups down in the States to invite Don onto your podcasts, onto your audio shows, because I'm telling you, he's a gold mine for our side, and he's not recognized yet. Okay, Don, with that butter, you're on.
Well, good morning, John, and greetings to the British People's League and white people's listening everywhere from Mexican-occupied Southern California. I'm told that on Sunday they turn off the direction finders so I can relax a little bit and not worry about being hunted down by the New World Order. But what I wanted to talk about today, what John and I had discussed last week, was the importance of white unity. During the last, I would say the last year, it seems as though there has been a proliferation of new white podcasts and white broadcasters and white people, some very young white people getting their feet wet in the pro-white cause and contributing to pro-white advocacy. And sometimes we're very critical of people. We don't like their show. We don't like their guests. We don't like their attitude. There's a little too much salty language.
Yeah.
They tap dance around certain issues.
That's me.
Yeah, I know. But there's one thing we have to remember. We need every white voice, and we need every single one. And not all of us are gonna see things the same way. And those of you who, it's like every parent was once a child, and so you have to. You give children certain breaks, and we need to look at these new young people in the business, and even some of the old people, and give them a break. If they have the courage to step forward and speak on behalf of our people, we all need to pull together. And the importance of white unity cannot be underestimated. And I want to emphasize that fact by reading from what many white people would consider a very unlikely source, and that source is the book Dreams from My Father. Supposedly written by Barack Obama, the President of the United States. There's a certain measure of controversy about whether he actually wrote the book himself, or indeed whether he ever actually bothered to read it. But there's a statement in here that is attributed to his African grandfather. His African grandfather, Oyango Obama, was of the Luo tribe, and he was very loyal to the British. He served in the British military during World War II. He was a very, very intelligent man. He taught himself English. He learned how to translate documents, and he worked as a cook, a housekeeper, kind of an administrator. And he was an interesting, insightful man. Well, in the 80s, Barack Obama, the grandson, the president, went back to Kenya, to his ancestral homeland, and wanted to visit the family. And they had made some statements to him about his grandfather that are reported in Dreams from My Father. And specifically at page 417, there's an interesting statement. He says, one of the family members, an aunt or a grandmother, it's not completely clear, talks about conversations between the grandfather and Obama's father, and he said, how can the African defeat the white man? He would tell your father, Barack Sr., when he cannot even make his own bicycle. And he would say that the African could never win against the white man because the black man only wanted to work with his own family or clan, while all white men worked to increase their power. Quote, the white man alone is like an ant, Oyango would say. He can be easily crushed, but like an ant, the white man works together. His nation, his business, these things are more important to him than himself. He will follow his leaders and not question orders. Black men are not like this. Even the most foolish black man thinks he knows better than the wise man. That is why the black man will always lose, end quote. Now, I'm not citing this for the premise black men will always lose. I wish black people well. I do not profit from their misfortune. I am not threatened by their success. I rejoice in the honest success of any peoples. But the importance in this statement, the importance of white unity by someone who observed white people in operation is something that we cannot overlook. If we are going to continue to exist as a people, it is essential that we learn to love each other and to work together and to overcome squabbles and disputes and petty partisan, petty religious, petty political disagreements. There are always going to be disagreements on how we reach the goal, but we've got to have a common goal, even if we take different roads and we use different modes of transportation to get there. We have to learn to man the barricades together, even if we disagree on certain points.
Sure. Like, if I just slip in, Don, I mean, there's some blogs really irritate me. Well, I'm over the hill for one thing, and the young people have got their own way. So in accordance with your suggestion, I fully agree, folks. And what Don's saying, I guess to put it my way, is simply, if you can't stomach a certain approach, just ignore it and accent your positive approach. And well, Don has taught me this. I mean, to realize that approach I abhor, may not like it, disgusts me. But guess what? There are others out there, other white patriots, who enjoy that approach, who like that approach. So there's no point in arguing back and forth. Or the corny expression, as my friends at Candor Magazine put it, don't air your dirty laundry in public. Let's keep a white, clean appearance.
To personalize this to some extent, I mean, I was not always an active white person as I am now. I was, for most of my life, a quote-unquote color-blind conservative. The operative word is blind. I don't know if they have that term in Canada, but in America, it's a conservative who believes in extreme individuality, and everybody should be judged on their own merits, and we shouldn't treat different races differently. Of course, this rule only applies to white people. It doesn't apply to any of the Mexicans or the blacks, who are all very well organized to dispossess us and loot our wealth and enslave our children. It doesn't apply to them. They're allowed to organize. The people who led me to see the light, and as a professional person, I confess to a certain measure of snobbery, and I'm embarrassed and ashamed of it, but I was led to see the light largely by blue-collar people and young people. And, I somehow stumbled across white activism, and it was the blue-collar working people with their honesty, their clarity of vision, who led the way for me. And I can tell you, I've done a lot of soul searching, and I really reevaluated my view of white people and the importance of all of us coming together. We need every white person. We need the white worker. We need the white professional. The white man, the white woman. None of us can exist without the other. I think of how many cowardly lawyers I've seen and how many cowardly professionals who won't say boo. They're terrified. You have blue-collar white people who will speak openly and forthrightly and honestly. And there was some high school kids I was amazed that I worked with, and they weren't even skinheads. They were clean-cut, well-spoken people, and they really stood up in their schools and stood up for their principles and for their race and their people. And he said the liberals in many cases just kind of faded away. Our enemies are terrified of morally and intellectually confident white people. They are terrified of us.
Amen. I mean, for sure. And when I hear people who say that, oh, it's hopeless, we haven't got a prayer, blah, blah, blah. Well, I say baloney. Getting through Don's whole theme here. When we're together, the other races fear us. Look, I don't want to get into a song and dance about what do you mean by fear. I don't want people to fear us. But I'll tell you what, this boy, I ain't fooling around. If this keeps going downhill and gets worse and worse, I pray for a white Genghis Khan. Until the white Genghis Khan comes, I'll go along with the nice, sweet, smooth approach. No, I'm not suggesting anybody gets locked up. But when we are united and when we are fed up throughout the white man's history, we push back and it gets very messy. However, we are offering you, the other races who may be tuned in, the opportunity to let us be, to leave us alone, to let our white culture, our white history, and our white advance go forward. Leave us alone and let us build in a positive way, and there'll be no problem. But if we keep getting our backs pushed against the wall, when we have total white unity, then you will have to stand out of our way.
Well, I believe it was 1519, Hernan Cortez landed on the coast of Mexico with a small number of ships, 187 men, and I think he had 15 horses. I may be wrong about the exact number of horses, but you can look it up if it's important. Within 2 years, the mighty Aztec Empire with its teeming millions was destroyed. Shows you what a few good white men can do.
Yeah. And again, folks, we're not looking to that. Don is the most positive white promoter of our peoples that I'm in touch with in the whole United States. And if he sounds extreme, then I don't know what's wrong with you, because he's putting it out in a very calm, deliberate fashion.
Well, I'm not extreme. I'm not invading Mexico. Mexicans are invading my country and enslaving my people and looting our wealth and dispossessing and ethnically cleansing us. I wish Mexico well. Been there one time. I'd never go back. It's not my cup of tea. But they've had their own country for 500 years, and if they want a better life, perhaps they should start by creating one in their own country, as my forefathers did in this country when they came here in the 1600s, and there was nothing here. There was no free health care. There was no free public education, no safety net. The safety net was your neighbors and white unity. I wish I was familiar enough with Canadian history to cite to an example in your history. I'm sure there are many examples.
Well, the one thing, sure, Don, the one thing, I mean, Mexicans could start by cleaning up their streets. Well, it's just inborn in white people to clean up their streets. I mean, when you first came on our show was way back, and you talked about, you remember visiting Ontario with the little cottage country and so on. But it's clean, and still the white villages are clean. And that's your beginning, is how well are your streets kept, etc. And you go from there. Yes, there's intelligent black people, as Don quoted from the book, etc. But we're talking the norm here, and white unity is the key. And I just want to quickly slip in a plug for John Gerhardt in Columbus, Ohio. He's still out there, folks, and he really promoted the white unity theme in the late 70s. He really did a job at it. Then he switched more to prison ministries for white people. I just want to throw that plug in for him, Don. And here we are all these years later. Yep. Go, Don.
That sounds terrific. I never met John, but I've heard you speak very highly of him. We don't have, in the United States, we very rarely have sectarian conflict. You know, like between the French and the Germans, or the British and the Irish. We all pretty much come together. Here, that's not so much a problem. And here in America, our squabbling is just over, are we going to, is Christianity an appropriate religion for the white race? And there's an atheist contention of the white people, and there's a Southern Nationalist faction, and there's all these other groups. There's a fellow, Harold Covington, who's starting a white community in the Northwest. I think he calls it the Northwest Front.
Yeah, there's so many choices. That again, it goes back to you. You stopped me in my tracks in a conversation we had a few months back, and there's so many different choices out there, like in the supermarket shelf. Which brand of the product you want? So whatever suits your nature. There's a white group out there right now that suits your taste.
Well, John Linder, who is an atheist, pro-white activist, I think he lives in Missouri. He has a website, Vanguard News Network, and then he was on a podcast debating a Southern nationalist. And Linder is an atheist, and he has he's very dismissive of the South. He says the South will never rise again and give up on it, blah, blah, blah. And the Southern nationalist was very emphatic about asserting his Southern traditions and his Christian background and all that. And I thought, well, it's nice to have a debate, but so what? If I lived in the South, Southern nationalism isn't exactly my cup of tea. It doesn't work very well here in Southern California. But if I lived in Alabama or Georgia, I'd be signing on with Southern nationalists. They're white brothers, they're white kinsmen. If they have some religious beliefs I don't necessarily agree with, they're not forcing me to go to their church, and I'm not trying to burn their church down. So, for God's sakes, let's unify and push on together. I remember the South as a child. I not only did I live in Canada briefly as a child, I attended grade school there. And greetings to Mrs. Nielsen, if she's still out there and still alive. You seemed like a hard taskmaster when I was 7 years old, but I remember your name, and I remember you, and I remember very few other teachers I had, so it made an impact on me. But I spent time in the South as well, and you can hardly find two cultures as different as Canada and the American South. I love both. I was nurtured and treated kindly by both. For God's sakes, let's love each other, come together with one another, and even if we have our disagreements, gentlemen can disagree, and that is one of the strengths of our culture. We can disagree, but we have to come together and fight together for our existence, or we will be erased.
Yeah, well said. I'm good at arguing, but you're not leaving me any openings for an argument.
Well, I don't want to argue with my brother.
No, I guess
it's always a pleasure for me to come on your show because I have so many wonderful childhood memories of Ontario, even though I lived there only briefly, 2 different times in 6 months each time. But we moved there in the dead of winter, and I saw the spring come and new life bloom, and the pollywogs and the pools, and there was a lot of mud. I didn't like the mud very much when the thaw came. I'm sure you know about that. But the spring and the summer were really beautiful. I think often of my time that my family spent in Canada. And I'm proud of the fact that we left the country just as clean as we found it when we moved back to the United States.
But see, you are I don't want to bother you, but folks, this is like a walk of miracle here. Here I am stuck in a village, hiding in a village where it's still white, bright, and beautiful. I don't have to look at the multicult mob. But here, getting a contact with someone like Don in Southern California, I mean, just imagine, here we are. And then really highly tuned into our shows these days lately. Candor magazine in Britain works out good because they're in the magazine business, hands-on copy, and they really promote these shows. With Don, I tell you, if I was any of you podcasters out there in the States, you invite Don. If you don't know how to, well, you can contact britishcanada@gmail.com, britishcanada@gmail.com, and then, we'd pass any inquiries on to Don's email because he's a walking gold mine for our cause, the promotion of white unity in a very positive fashion. And unfortunately, I've been guilty in the past, too, of internal bad mouthings and so on. But no, I give Don full credit for accenting the positive, and that's the way it must go. And again, you may despise different approaches. Well, just do your own thing. Do your own approach. Don't air the dirty linen in public. Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Even sometimes in private, we don't need to air it. So I know the Irish question is a difficult thing with British people, and I've stepped on my, I've gotten off on the wrong foot. I enjoy reading Irish oratory, and I just like to read it. I think it flows, and it's a very, very beautiful use of the language. And I got into trouble with some British people once by quoting an Irish orator, King Dan O'Connell, who said, if the British mean to come to Ireland to do us harm, I have Irish women enough to stop them.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Well, it's tragic, that's for sure. So as you say, accent the positive. Now we're getting down to about 1915 mark, and as you steady listeners know, we only have 20 minutes. We don't have an extended broadband. So perhaps then, Don, if you want to say farewell till the next time, and then I've got a little blurb to make here. So did you want to say goodbye then, Don?
I'll say goodbye to the people listening, and thank you again for having me on your show.
Oh, are you kidding? It's a pleasure. Now, my question to myself, though, we got to figure out a way to get guests on with YouTube videos. I haven't figured that out yet, but we are going to switch to YouTube videos, folks, so watch for us there. And this is the January 20th broadcast 2013 with our guest, Honorable Don from Southern California. So keep tuned in. Keep an eye on the homepage, BritishPeoplesLeague.com, to see where we're at. We update our comments daily, sometimes even hourly. Okay, folks, appreciate your tuning in, and we'll catch you the next time, whenever that will be. Goodbye for now.